This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, welcome everyone. Parshas, Tazria, Metzora. So we have a very interesting subject tonight. The name of the Shiur is Criminals in Shul. Obviously, no implications are being made. We're not trying to imply anything. It's actually over here, Kulam Ahuvim, Kulam Berurim, Kulam Kesherim. But, unfortunately, there is such a phenomenon, and which is not rare in today's day and age, where you could come into a shul and you could be sitting next to somebody who is a convicted felon. Either they did their time or they didn't do their time yet. And the question is, how do we treat them? Could we give them an aliyah? Do you say Shalom Aleichem to them? Do they sit in the Mizrach Vant? What type of reaction to the Jewish community have towards these people? And, Baruch Hashem, we're good over here, but I'm sure everybody's been to places where it's a little bit uncomfortable. And what's the correct reaction? Could you give them shlishi? Are you mechabed them? Let's say they have a plaque on the wall. On the one hand, if they did their time and they served their punishment, do they have the right to demonstrate their ability to be accepted by the community? Or is by countenancing them and being friendly to them and maybe being mechabed them, you're endorsing to discuss one aspect of it, and then maybe on a later occasion come back to the topic of giving aliyos to Ivrei Avera. And it's a very wide topic, because you could have people who committed white-collar sins, white-collar crimes. Okay, that's, it's a problem, but it might not be as fundamentally problematic as somebody who committed immoral type of behavior or deviant type of behavior. What we want to talk about tonight is another issue along the same lines, and that is, the halacha is somewhat rigid. There's a Shulchan Aruch, it's a code of law, and the Shulchan Aruch says this is mutter, and this is asur, and this is a suffix, and this is yesh lahachmir. And there are certain times where if people violate the halacha has to be upheld. Yikoif hadin sahar. In other words, there's a whole siman in Shulchan Aruch. If somebody violates even an Isser D'Rabbanan, sometimes the Bezdin will have to put somebody in cherem, even if it's not an Isser D'Oraisa, even if it's Isser D'Rabbanan. Or, if somebody acts out in shul, in public, there are certain halachos. How do we react to them? Do we stop the davening? Do we endorse certain types of behavior? And what would the halacha be if the halacha dictates that we put somebody in cherem? Now, obviously, in 2017, what do you think a person's reaction would be if they got a letter from Bezdin, Pliny ben Pliny, we're putting you in cherem? You think that's going to bring them closer to Torah mitzvahs or distance them from Torah mitzvahs? You think that ultimately is going to bring them closer to Hashem, or it's going to distance them from Hashem? You think that's going to enhance their avodas Hashem, or you think they have more kavanah and shmanas? Obviously, this is not a kiruv technique. This is not a kiruv tactic. This is not an Ar Samech and Eshat Torah. This is, putting people in cherem is not one of the top 10 strategies for bringing people tachas kanfei hashchina. But there are certain punitive measures and penalties that halacha requires. Well, what if you know that by putting someone in cherem, somebody doesn't give a get to his wife, or even less severe, let's say somebody violates Isurei D'Rabbanan and Bezdin has to put somebody in cherem, or the Shulchan Aruch says if somebody speaks by davening, they have to be addressed publicly. Do you think that person is going to come closer to Torah mitzvahs, or is going to be distanced? He's not coming closer. The next week, he'll come later to shul, if he comes at all. He may not bring his shul, he may not come to shul altogether. So, is it appropriate to uphold halacha if the repercussions are driving people away from the Rebbeinu Shalom? In other words, you have to balance two things. On the one hand, you have to uphold the halacha. On the other hand, you have to take into account the greater good. Are you bringing people closer to Hashem or distancing people from Hashem? So the sugya really begins with the Ramah. And the truth is, the sugya ends with the Ramah. The Ramah says, in Yeridei Siman Shin Lam Medal, it says Ramah in Sif Aleph, Umenadin Lamishu Chayiv Nidar. We put in cherem, someone who's chayiv cherem. Va'afilu yesh lacha shal yidei kain Yetzei l'tar basra. Even if you suspect he will go off the derech completely. In other words, he'll abandon the faith. Ein lachash b'kach. Don't worry. Don't be concerned. It's not your problem. If the halacha mandates that somebody has to be put in cherem, you put him in cherem, and then the expression is, come what may. It's not your problem, it's his problem. He shouldn't have violated the Avera in the first place. Okay. Now, the question is, where did the Rama get this from? It seems like a rather drastic halacha. How do we know that we're going to put somebody in cherem, even if the repercussions are that the person will go off the darach? And the Rama quotes, Piskei Mahari. The Mahari is Rabbi Yisrael Isserlin, the Chumash Hadeshen. The Taz quotes the Chumash Hadeshen, and he quotes the proof of the Chumash Hadeshen. How do we know that we'll put somebody in cherem despite the fact that they may go off the darach? So the Chumash Hadeshen quotes the Gemara in Kedushin on Daf Ayin Beis, and it's a very interesting Gemara. The Gemara talks about Rebbe Yehuda Anasi, the redactor of the Mishnah. And the Gemara talks about on Rebbe's last day, as he was dying, he gave some parting words to his children. And the Gemara says, now you have to realize, Rebbe lived, we're in the end of his life, the last 17 years of his life, in Sipari. And Rebbe is speaking now about what's taking place in Bavel. Now how would Rebbe know what's transpiring in Bavel? The answer is it's Nevuah. There's no way he could know. There's no technology for Rebbe to know the news, or you'll see even deeper than the news. Rebbe, in his dying words, he gives the following declarations. He says there's a place in Bavel called Humnaya. He says there's a place in Bavel called Humnaya, and everyone in that city is from Ammon. Everyone in that city is from Ammon. Everyone in that city is wearing, they have a langarekel, and they're wearing a beaver hat, and they have Vaisa Zokin. What do you mean everyone there is from Ammon? No, Rebbe's saying, by the way, they might look from, but you should know they're all Goyim. And then Rebbe says, there's another place, Maskaraya Ikababavel. There's a city, Maskaraya, they're all Mamzera. Not some of them, not most of them. Every last one of them are Mamzerim. So obviously, this is Nevuah. How would he know such a thing? First of all, it's in a different country, and how could he possibly know? And then he says, there's a city, Birka in Bavel. Their two brothers in Birka, they swap their wives. So obviously, their children are all Mamzerim. Okay. Then Rebbe said the following. Birta de Satya Ikababavel. There's a city called Birta de Satya. Hayoim Saru Me'acharei Hamakim. Today, they all went off the derech. Everyone in the city went off the derech. Why? The following thing happened. The fish pond overflooded. The fish were more accessible. And they went fishing on Shabbos. Now, to go fishing on Shabbos is a problem. It's tzad, right? It's a malacha. Vishamtinu Rav Achi Rav Oshia. And Rav Achi Rav Oshia put them in cherem. And what happened? V'ishtamud. And they became they went off the derech. They were nishmad. They shmadzach. They converted to another religion. So here's the story. Rebbe's there. He's lying on his deathbed. Maybe his eyes are closed, and he's talking to his children. And he says, "By the way, there's a place in Bavel called Birta de Satya. The fish pond overflowed, and they went fishing on Shabbos. And Rabbi Glatstein put them in cherem, and they all went off the derech." So says the Chumash Hadeshen, the Gemara is not a tabloid. Why is the Gemara reporting? First of all, Rebbe Chas v'Shalom. Why would Rebbe in his dying words be saying information about Birta de Satya? What was he teaching his children? Why would he tell his children that they went fishing and Rabbi Glatstein put them in cherem? Why is the Gemara reporting this to us? Says the Chumash Hadeshen, what Rebbe is teaching us is that if you are a halachic authority, and you know that by reprimanding someone and putting someone in cherem, they will leave Judaism entirely, you got to do it. You have to do it. You're allowed to do it, and you have to do it. You can't be afraid. And therefore, that is the reason why Rebbe taught this halacha. Rebbe is teaching us that do not be afraid of the repercussions of the correct halachic approach. Right? The Taz quotes the Chumash Hadeshen. And the Taz says he disagrees. He says, this Gemara does not teach you that you could punish someone and not care about what the repercussions are. Says the Taz, you think what Rebbe was teaching his children was that you're allowed to put someone in cherem, and even if the person's going to go off the derech, it's permitted. That's not what Rebbe's point was. Says the Taz, what Rebbe's point was, think about it. Why would Rebbe have to tell his children, by the way, there's a city of Berta de Satya, and they went fishing on Shabbos, and Rav Acha put them in cherem, and they went off the derech. I mean, that's obvious. You go over there, you'll see that's what happened. They went fishing on Shabbos, and the Rav Acha put them in cherem, and the people went off the derech. What Rebbe was trying to do was, Rebbe was proving to his children that he had nevuah. What's the proof? Because when Rebbe said, this city, they're all mamzerim, this city, they're all amoinim, how would Rebbe even know such a thing? The answer is, it's impossible with a regular human mind to know. Elamai, Rebbe's prophesying. So how do we know Rebbe's a prophet? So Rebbe's saying, I'll prove to you I'm a prophet. Because I'm going to tell you news right now of what's transpiring in Bavel that you could ascertain if I'm telling you the truth or not. You're going to send a letter to Bavel. You're going to find out that I hit it on the nail, that they went fishing on Shabbos, and they were put on cherem, and they went off the derech. And that proves I'm a Navi, which Bechlal is Pella. What do you mean Rebbe's a Navi? There were no Nevi'im anymore. This is well past the era of Nevuah. I guess it means Ruach HaKodesh. And Rebbe's therefore demonstrating, when I tell you that this city are all mamzeirim and this city are all amoinim, I have the inside scoop. But says the Taz, to put someone in cherem and be careless about the repercussions that they may leave Judaism, says the Taz, I'll bring you a proof, fakeret, I'll bring you a proof, the opposite, that you have to be very concerned with the actions that a bezdin takes if it's going to cause people to stray away from the Torah. Says the Taz, I'll bring you the following proof. Look at number 4. It's a Gemara in Kedushin on Daf Chaf Amad Beis. The Gemara says like this: you have a guy, he fell on hard times, and he didn't have any money, and he couldn't pay electricity, he couldn't pay the gas, he couldn't pay tuition, and all the other stuff that you got to pay for. So what did he do? He sold himself to serve Avodah Zarah. He's going to work in a base tiflus. He's going to work in a church. He's going to sweep for the Avodah Zarah, and he's going to be the secretary for the Avodah Zarah, and he's going to take care of the Avodah Zarah. Now he's not going to worship the Avodah Zarah, but he's getting there. He's close. In other words, he sold himself as an employee of Avodah Zarah. Now the guy did a terrible thing. To sell yourself as a slave to work for Avodah Zarah, even though you're not worshiping Avodah, that's like really a step away from Judaism. So the guy on his own sort of halfway left the fold. Is there a mitzvah to redeem him, or is there not a mitzvah to redeem him? So Gemara Kedushin says, Acharei nimkar geula tiyaloi, the Gemara darshans, that even after someone sells himself to a bad place, there's a mitzvah to redeem the guy. So it says the Taz, let's make a kal v'chomer. If a guy who did a terrible thing, and he sold himself to work for Avodah Zarah, so he didn't slip, he actively went away from the Torah, yet we have a mitzvah to be proactive and extricate him from the situation. So kal v'chomer, if there's a guy who sinned, how dare you're going to go ahead and put this guy in cherem to actively cause him to leave the fold? If we are required to redeem someone so that they don't leave the fold, alachas kama v'kama, you can take positive steps to throw somebody away and influence somebody to leave the fold. So that's the kal v'chomer of the Taz. In other words, if we're required to go out of our way to save somebody who began to leave the fold, he's somewhat of a rasha, he sold himself to Avodah Zarah, and we're obligated to go redeem him, alachas kama v'kama, how could we actively put a guy in cherem if that's going to cause him to leave the fold? That's the raya of the Taz. Against the Ramah. The Ramah says no problems. The Ramah says put the guy in cherem, don't worry about the repercussions, come what may. The Taz says no, we have rayas from Shas not like that. Yeah? We have rayas from Shas not like that. Comes the Shach in the Kudas HaKesef, and the Shach says he doesn't buy the Taz's raya. The Shach says, what do you think? We don't want to try to bring people back to Judaism. We don't want to encourage people to be more observant. Of course we do. You don't think we'll do everything we can to make sure people don't slip away? Of course we'll be careful. But says the Shach, what does the Taz want from us? That if the halacha mandates that we put someone in cherem, we're not going to follow the halacha? The words of the Shachar, he says like this, Hacha kivan dedin bezdin hu shemenadin oisai. Look at number 5 in the Kudas HaKesef. Kudas HaKesef are the footnotes of the Shach on the Taz. Since the halacha is that we put a guy in cherem, ein lachush. You cannot be worried about the repercussions. The imloi kain batla din Yisrael. Because otherwise the halacha is gone. It's out the window. If every time we're insistent on halacha, people are going to say, well, then I'm not going to come. Imagine, you have a rabbi. If he comes, he wants to talk about an Inyan. And they tell him, Rabbi, if you talk about kashrus, then we're going to go eat chazer. Don't tell us to be zahir on this chumrah. If you tell us this chumrah, we're not going to eat kosher altogether. So what should the rabbi do? He should throw out the Shulchan Aruch in the garbage? Because they're threatening him? I mean, that's your problem, He has to say the halacha is a halacha, this is a preference, and if you don't like it, there's nothing I could do. Like the Torah says, Ki Yesharim Darchei Hashem, the ways of God are just. Tzadikim yelchu bam, the tzadikim walk in them, and Parshim yikashel bam, the Parshim will be nichshel. Imagine, a Rav gets up, he talks about snios. Oh! You're talking about that a knee has to be covered. If you tell me one more time that my knee has to be covered, which is an open halacha in Shulchan Aruch, you can't say, if you make kiddush in front of your wife, and her knee's not covered, you don't get credit for kiddush. Unless it's under the table. It's halacha in Shulchan Aruch. You don't get credit for the mitzvah. So you can tell a rabbi, no, don't talk about it, because if you talk about it, then we're going to be blatantly disrespectful. Okay, well, I'm sorry to tell you, this is the religion, this is the halacha, and, we got to present the facts, You can't bend, and you can't be frightened what the repercussions of speaking the truth are. That's the point of the Shach. But look carefully at the words of the Shach. The Shach says, "The imloi kain batla din Yisrael." Otherwise, the halacha of all halachas are out the window. In other words, if you are afraid that by saying a halacha, people are going to go the other way, so what are you going to do then? I mean, there's something called Shulchan Aruch. So you're going to hide it? You're going to cover it over? That's the point of the Shach. In other words, the Shach defends the Ramah. The Shach says, you say the halacha as it is, you offer the punitive measure, and the guy's going to go off, so what are you supposed to do? Bend the halacha? You can't bend the halacha.
So why is it saying here that it's hitchcock? Chumash edition.
He's saying the Taz asked on the Chumash Hadeshen and says the Shach, I'm defending the Chumash Hadeshen because otherwise, Batla Din Yisrael. Okay, the Chavos Yoyer, Rabbi Yoyer Chaim Bachrach also defends the Ramah. Rabbi Yoyer Chaim Bachrach also defends Ramah, but with a slightly different nuanced Nakuda. And he says like this. He says, on the one hand, there's certainly a concept of flexibility in halacha. I mean, we know there's a concept, small doicha v'yamin makarev. What does that mean, small doicha v'yamin makarev? That means you can't just, somebody walks into a shul, punch him in the, you're not following halacha, bam, obviously you have to use a certain seichel and balance and technique and diplomacy, So small doicha means, you offer a rebuke with your left hand, and you bring close with your right hand. It has to be a balanced approach. Or like Chazal say, you don't rebuke people about everything. There's a concept of mutav sheyu shoygagim v'al yiyu mazidim. In other words, but that applies in very limited circumstances, something that's not explicit in the Chumash, that people are going to for sure violate anyway, sometimes better not to bring up a subject. So on the one hand, the Chavos Yoyer says, we see from here that the halacha offers a certain degree of flexibility. In other words, you can't come in like a bulldozer and say, there's halacha, and But then the Chavos Yoyer says like this, in the paragraph that begins, Masha Ein Kain, on page 2. He says, Masha Ein Kain, says the Chavos Yoyer, Im Pasha Bar Yisrael, if a Jew sins, B'midi D'chayiv Aleh Mamoin, if he's responsible to pay money, or malchus, or he's liable to be whipped, or nidoy, or to be put in cherem. Ein lemnoya klal, you cannot hold back a punishment which is halachically mandated out of a chashash. If you administer this punishment, he's going to sin more. Why? Because he says He says you cannot be concerned that the person will sin more. Why not? So I refer you to the end of his piece, about 10 lines before the end of number 6. He says, You have to be concerned for the deviance of the rest of the generation. Meaning like this. Here you have a guy. Let's say he has to be put in cherem, he violated an Issa D'Rabbanan. So now you got to wait. If we punish him severely, we put him in cherem. Now, what does it mean to be put in cherem? Put in cherem means he's not allowed to daven in a minyan. You hear this? It used to be a punishment to tell somebody, you're violating this Rabban, you're not allowed to go to the minyan. Wow. You can't bench with a mezumin. Nobody could talk to you. You can't have interactions with people. So it's a very serious punishment. Now, if we administer this cherem, the guy might leave the religion. He'll never come to Shul again. He'll never do a mitzvah again. But on the other hand, says the Chavos Yair, so what? So we shouldn't punish him? If we don't punish him, then all the dozens and dozens of people saw him do the Avera. They'll say, it's not so bad. I guess it's not so terrible. So on the one hand, you may be pushing him away from the religion, but by not administering the punishment, you're pushing everybody else away from the religion. So says the Chavos Yair, the Kilkul Hadar is much more important and is more weight carries much more weight than this individual. In other words, the halacha, the reason why you have to be and uphold the halacha, it's a little bit of a different nuance than the shach. Listen carefully. The nuance of the shach is, if you don't uphold the halacha, then you might as well take the Shulchan Aruch and bury it. Then the Shulchan Aruch has no meaning. If every time you try to uphold the halacha, people say, you do this, then I'm not gonna. Then, the Shulchan Aruch doesn't carry any weight. That's the point of the shach. The point of the Chavos Yair is, it's not a matter of the halacha. It's for the people's benefit. How's that? Because this guy who sinned, who you may be chasing away, he's not the only Jew in the world. What about everybody else who saw his behavior, and if they don't see a proper punishment, they're going to think, I guess it's not so terrible. So therefore, says the Chavos Yair, to the point where, you find in the Gemara in Shabbos, that if somebody was once riding a horse on Shabbos, and the Chachamim stoned the guy to death. So, wait a second. Riding horse on Shabbos, it's not even Nisr D'Oraisa. It's not a Mechal Shabbos. It's Nisr D'Rabbanan. Can't ride a horse. Why? He might pluck off a branch. So what are you stoning the guy? He's not even Chayiv Malkus. The answer is that sometimes you got to give somebody a very strict punishment. It's not for their benefit. It's not bringing them closer to God. Not in this world. Maybe it's actually bringing them closer to Him in Olam Haba. But it's not for him. It's for everybody else. So says the Chavos Yair, the Ramah is correct, and therefore the Chavos Yair and the Shach defend the Psak of the Ramah, that the Bezin has to offer a cherem, even if they're concerned that the guy will go off the derech. The halacha is, you do what you do, you follow the halacha. Gentlemen, if you do what you do, and that is enough. Okay. The Taz, though, brings another raya against Rama. Well, it is a very interesting raya, a very interesting halacha. If a woman was married, and she had a little kid, she had a baby, and she's nursing the baby, and now she's getting remarried. So the halacha is, a woman who is nursing someone else's baby cannot get remarried.
For 2 years.
What?
For 2 years, no?
That's because you nurse for 2 years. Right. Meinekes chaveiro is also for 2 years, because the yanika is 2 years. Right? So the halacha, midrabanan, you cannot marry meinekes chaveiro. Right? Fine. A woman in halacha is considered meinekes for 2 years. So for example, we don't necessarily paskin this way. This is not normative halacha, but let's say there's a shaila, a nursing woman. Does a nursing woman fast? Right? So there are leniencies for a nursing woman. Well, what if a woman nursed for 2 weeks and then she gave formula? There is a shita of the marsham that she's considered nursing for 2 years, because she's meinekes for 2 years. even though she's not actively nursing, because the Gemara Nida says that a woman, for 2 years, Evarem, Misparekes, her Evarim are not aligned. They're like disjointed until, she got to put herself back together. It takes 2 years to get herself back together. But in any event, again, that's not normal. Normal halacha is she has to be actively nursing. But the halacha is Meinekes Chavera, you can't marry Meinekes Chavera. So here's the shaila. There's a tshuva, the Taz quotes, the tshuva of the Mari Mintz. Who's Mari Mintz? Mari Mintz was, Rabbi Yehuda Mintz was the son-in-law of Rav Meir Katzenellenbogen, the Maram Padua. And here's the shaila. Somebody came to Mari Mintz, a woman who is nursing a baby, goes to the Bezdin and says, hey Bezdin, I want to marry this guy. You see this nice Jewish guy? I want to marry him. And if you don't let me marry him, that's it. Goodbye. I'm leaving the faith. I'm out of here. I'm going to become a Christian. And the Mari Mintz paskined, look, if we don't let the woman marry this Jewish guy, then she's going to go off the derech. The kid's going to go off the derech. So in order to save 2 Jewish people, it's mutter for her to remain living. Not only remain, we allow her to go violate Isser D'Rabbanan, because if we insist she follow the halacha, she's going to go off the derech. So what do you see from here? Exactly not like the Ramah. Because the Ramah says that if you have to follow the halacha, we don't care if people go off the derech. And here, we're allowing a woman to marry Meinekes Chavera. In other words, she's nursing a baby. She's going to marry another man, which she's not allowed to do, because otherwise she's threatening us. She's going to go off the derech. It's a kasha on the Ramah. It's a stira to the Ramah.
Not because of the kid? Didn't decide because of the kid?
So you're saying it's because she's going to go off the derech and the kid's going to go off the derech. But the Ramah, we'll get to that in a minute. What if a kid is going to... We'll come back to that in a minute.
Parents that don't show much about in the kids.
We'll come back to that in a second. So there's a very interesting tshuva in the Chassam Sofer. Chassam Sofer says in a tshuva, you got it on your sheet, amazingly, Achelek Yoradea, Siman Shin Chav Beis, number 7, says the Chassam Sofer, first of all, in his opinion, the Ramah is correct. As the Chavos Yair defends the Ramah with clear rayas, and says the Chassam Sofer on the 6th line, Umehem Ein Lazos. And he says, the Taz try to bring a raya from the fact that if somebody sells themselves to an Avodah Zarah, we actively redeem them and try to extricate them. Why do we do that? Doesn't that indicate that we're very fearful that people don't go off the derech? Says the Chassam Sofer Fakeret. Because if you look in the Gemara and get in, that the Gemara says very clearly that if somebody sells themselves one time, then we try to extricate them. Because they probably want to do tshuva, and they probably fell into bad times. But if someone who's a repeated offender, someone sold themselves 2 or 3 times to Avodah Zarah, when we throw the rock at them, we say, get lost, don't let the door hit you on your way out. Says Chassam Sofer, from here you see that in the beginning, if somebody really took one little slip, we'll do whatever we can to bring them back. But once somebody is demonstrating the repeated offender, then we just got to follow the halacha, and it's their own problem that they let themselves slip so far. Says the Chassam Sofer, what about the fact that the Mari Mintz allowed a woman who's nursing to marry another man? But the halacha is you're not to marry Meinekes Chavera. So how could we allow her threats that she's going to go off the derech to allow us to be flexible in the halacha? So Chassam Sofer says a very big chiddush. Why are you not allowed to marry Meinekes Chavera? Why can't you marry a woman who's nursing a child?
The problem is that she's not going to be...
For whose benefit is it? For the baby's benefit. Why is it for the baby's benefit? Because if a woman who's nursing a baby gets married, you see, what do you think the kid's going to eat at the chasana, and during the Sheva Brachos, and during the first 3 weeks, and then during the Shana Rishona? The kid's going to starve, die, thirsty. He's going to be a neglected kid. So for the benefit of the baby, we say the mother cannot get married. Says the Chassam Sofer. That's so it comes out. It's for the benefit of the kid. Now, if this kid could talk, if this little pipsy could talk, and you could say, "Hey, kid, I have a question. Is it better for you for us to forbid your mother from getting married, so that she could leave Judaism entirely and go either marry an oisvar or become a meshumad? What would you prefer? Or would you rather her marry a nice Jewish boy and you have a nice home to live in? So the kid would say, normally I wouldn't want my mother to get remarried because I'd be very hungry. But under these circumstances, it's for my benefit for the Chachamim to allow my mother to get remarried. I'm in a much better matzav if my mother remarries and my mother doesn't remarry. So says the Chassam Sofer, under these circumstances, the Chachamim never answered the woman from getting married in the first place. It's not a kasha on the Ramah. The Taz wanted to bring a raya from here that, we see from here that since the woman says that if you don't let me remarry and go off the derech, we're so concerned about women going off the derech or Jews going off the derech. Says the other, we're not concerned at all. If the halacha is we don't allow something, we don't allow something. But you have to understand the underlying rationale behind the halacha. What's the reason you're not allowed to marry Menekas Chaver? The reason you're not allowed to marry Menekas Chaver is for the kid's benefit. So here, the kid would want the mother to remarry a Jewish man so that the mother doesn't defect from the religion entirely. And even more, says the Chassam Sofer. Says the Chassam Sofer, even if we could tell the mother, so go off the derech, and we could save the kid, so the mother's going to go off the derech and get married or live with another man. So miman of shach, she ain't nursing the kid. So therefore, there's no reason for us to demand that she doesn't marry this Jewish guy, because either way she's going to. In other words, she says, let me marry this Jewish guy, otherwise I'm going off the derech, and she'll be mezana with many people. In other words, the kid has a better shot to get a good meal if the mother remains faithful to the religion than if we let her veer off. Okay, by the way, just want to point out, if you look at number 8 in the Shas Tshuvas Radvaz of Reb David ben Zimra, the Radvaz was the Rebbe of the Arizal. He's a Rav in Cairo for 40 years. He wrote more than 1,200 Shuvos. Says the Radvaz, a very interesting question. Question is like this: you have overt avaryanim, and when we come to reprimand them, they say, "No, don't you dare say a word to me. If you say one word to me, I'm leaving the religion." So the Radvaz says, this question literally plagued me my entire life. He said, "Kol yamai ani mitzta'er al zeh." My entire life, I was distressed over this. Ki al kain tafuk Torah, because if we are bend and we are humble and we sort of shy away from reprimanding these people, the whole Torah will falter. We will not have the kayach to rebuke the Rishayim. Says the Radvaz, Al zeh ani mispalel b'chol yom. That's why I daven every day, shlo yera takala al yadi, that no stumbling block comes my way. Meaning, says Radvaz, we're required to uphold the halacha. But then he ends off like this. He says something very interesting. He says toward the bottom, he says, if we would have to shy away every time we're concerned, where's the person going to go? What's the person going to do? Then basically we would never be able to present any authentic Torah. And says the Radvaz, Torah would only be among the Sridim. You'd have a few individuals, a few select people who would keep the halacha, and everybody else would be Ish kol hayoshev einav tasa. So says the Radvaz the following. He says, if a guy comes to us and says, if you say one word to me and you reprimand me, I'm going to go do this and this and Avera. Says the Radvaz, you don't even have to call his bluff. If someone threatens that they're going to do a big Avera, if you tell them this and this, you could be sure they've done it already. You could be sure, or they'll do it anyway. You could be sure they'll do it anyway. And, therefore, you do whatever you can to uphold the halacha. And if this guy, says the Radvaz, something very interesting. I call Yisrael Arevim Zelos. I am responsible for his spiritual welfare. No, not this guy. This guy who is going to leave the fold, he's a mumar, you're not responsible for him. You're responsible for loyal Jews. You're not responsible for people who are disloyal. However, says the Radvaz, the bottom line is, even though this is the halacha, yesh lamanig hadar lios maton bedvarim ke'ela. A leader has to be very deliberate and very patient. Not every individual is the same. Not every avera is the same. And basically, ein l'dayan ela lefi ra'os einei hadayan. In other words, the dayan has to make a judgment call. Is it worth it for this individual? In other words, if I uphold the law, is there a chance I could bring him back? Is this person reachable? If he's reachable, then it's a little bit of a different approach than somebody who's already not reachable. If the guy is not reachable, this is halacha, go fly a kite, go jump in the lake. If the person maybe could be responsive, then you could be a little bit more flexible and a little bit more tolerant. Again, says Rabbi, the halacha is you uphold the halacha at any cost. But still, you have to be able to use a certain degree of proper analysis. Okay, so the bottom line is, most poskim, if you look in the Steichemed, in Mareches Hey, Oislam et Zayin, the Steichemed writes, the consensus of poskim is like the Ramah, that if the halacha mandates a certain course of action, you got to do it, and come what may. That's the reality of the halacha. Again, and every dayan has to use the appropriate seichel. Okay, let's move on to the next area very briefly, and that is another Ramah. The Ramah is found in number 10. Let's see the Ramah. Now this is where it becomes a little bit more drastic. Well, the Ramah wants to know, what if a guy, you put him in cherem, but you need to take even more extreme measures. Says the Ramah, Yesh reshus lebezdin lahachmer olav. Bezdin has authority to be so machmir. Shelo yemoylu banov. You could tell the guy, hey pal, if you violate this again, you're making a bris next week. No, you're not. We do not allow the moyel to circumcise your kid. Get lost. Now, that guy is for sure, he ain't coming to Hashkama and you have Vasikin the next day, But you could tell a person, if you don't follow Halacha, we're not going to allow you to circumcise your kid. Oh, Nebuch, you have to bury your brother? You can't bury him. Says Ramah, we could tell him, your wife cannot come to Shul. And finally, you're allowed to throw the kid out of the yeshiva.
So you're punishing the kids.
You're punishing the kids. So comes the Yamsha Shlomo, comes the Marshal, and by the way, where does this halacha come from? The Ramah quotes in Mukhe Yosef, and Mukhe Yosef quotes Rav Paltoi Goin, that if somebody is issued a warning from Bezdin, and Bezdin issues a certain decree on a person to follow a certain gezerah, and the guy refuses, he's Shiur of Ladin, then you could do whatever you need to do. You could tell him he can't mal his kid, you could kick the wife out of Shul, you could send the kids home from yeshiva. So Yamsha Shlomo says, what? What did the kid do wrong? You could send the kids home from yeshiva? Don't you know the whole world stands on Hevel PM Shel Tinokah Shel Beis Rabban? The whole world stands on the learning of little children. What did the kids do wrong? Just because the father sinned, what did the kids do wrong? What? You mean the kids didn't do anything wrong, but that's the natural repercussion. So okay, by the mamzer, look, the mother, it was an illicit relation, but here the father did an avera, so now the kids have to suffer. We're going to see, maybe there is such a concept like that.
There is another one also that someone doesn't.
The woman can get divorced. She has a reason to get divorced.
Again, it's another subject. Who could, she can't terminate it on her own. But okay, but the Yamsha Shlomo.
If someone has a siruf against them, they could kick the kid out of the yeshiva.
That's exactly halacha the Ramah. That if somebody has a siruf ladin against them, the Ramah says you could kick the kid out of yeshiva. Yeah. So the Yamsha Shlomo says, how could such a thing be? Everybody knows that if you leave Torah for a day, the Torah leaves you for 2 days. And Tazveini Yom Yomayim Ezveka. So you kick the kid out of yeshiva for a year, he's going to send him back 3 years. What did the kid do wrong? To tell a wife the wife can't go to shul? Well, what did the wife do wrong? When Achan sinned with the cherem, so we punished Mrs. Achan. Mrs. Achan is still a wonderful lady. Why do we have to add insult to injury? It's bad enough her husband's an oisfarf. Why are we punishing her? And therefore the Yamsha Shlomo says, "V'chimeduma shelo yatsu oisay shnei dvarim mipi hagoyin." I do not believe, says the Yamsha Shlomo, that Rav Paltagon would say such a thing. Chas v'shalom to punish the wife, chas v'shalom to punish the kids. In fact, says the Yamsha Shlomo, the story happened in my city. somebody was Sir Vladin, and they wanted to send the kids home from yeshiva, and I did not allow. So basically, but the Ramah paskins that if someone is Sir Vladin, you could send the children home. How could such a thing be? So basically, there are three approaches, and let's learn the three approaches. Number one, you have the approach of the Taz, and the Taz says like this, similar to what Zemi was saying, that there are two types of children. There are adult children, and then there are minors. There are ketanim. Everybody knows that once a kid is 13 years old, he's his own entity. When he learns, he gets reward. When he does an avera, he gets punished. However, when a kid is under bar mitzvah, whatever he does is on the father's account, right? When a kid becomes bar mitzvah, you say, Baruch Shapatrani Me'on Shemazah, and vice versa. The learning of the kid accrues to the father. So the kid is not his own entity. The kid is sort of an extension of the father until he's 13 years old. Well, says the Taz, the halacha of the Ramah, that you could send the kid home from yeshiva. The Ramah said, you're going to stop the kid from learning. What did the kid do wrong? The answer is, he's talking about a kid under 13 years old. Under 13, a child is not his own entity. He's an extension of the father. Anyway, but when he's under 13, his learning doesn't go to him, it goes to the father. So if the father is an oisvarf, and the father is Sir Vladin, and he's chayiv cherem, we're not going to let the kid learn. We're going to send him home. But once the kid is 13 and he's his own entity, why would a kid suffer because of his father's infraction? By the way, it's the same thing regarding kares. The Maral says regarding kares that unfortunately a punishment is hu v'zaroi nechrasen. The Maral says it's only banim ketanim, only small children who are an extension of the father. But banim gedolim, the kares would not affect banim gedolim. Okay, that's the approach of the Taz. The Chassam Sofer has an incredible approach. Very, very bekitzer. What was the question of the Yamsha Shlomo? Yamsha Shlomo says, the whole world stands on the learning of the kid, and you're going to send the kid home, and the kid's going to lose that on the schar. Chassam Sofer says, a davar nifla. No. If you send the kid home, and the kid doesn't learn, the kid's not going to lose that on the schar, and the world's not going to lose that on the schar. And if you send the wife home, the wife's not going to lose that on her schar for coming to shul. But what do you mean? But they didn't come to shul and they didn't learn. No, but there's a concept. Chishev lasos mitzvah, v'nenas v'lo yasa, mala olav kilasa. Somebody wants to do a mitzvah, and they're extenuating circumstances, and they can't do it. It's like they did it. Remember the old shiur from Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, right? If somebody would like to do a mitzvah, and they can't do it, Gemara and Brachas Davav, Hashem considers as if they did it. So the kid wanted to learn. Elamai, he can't learn. Why? Because Bezdin doesn't let him. So the kid gets schar. Now the world wants the kid to learn. And the kid wants to learn. So the world will get schar. Elamai, you want the father to get schar? No. Because legabe the father, it's his fault that the kid's not learning. So since it's his fault the kid's not learning, the schar of the kid won't go to the father. So the kid will get rewarded in Olam Haba. And the world will reap the benefits of the kid not learning, but he wanted to learn. But the father loses all the schar because regarding the father, it's the father's fault that the kid's not learning. It's an incredible concept, an incredible application of Chishev Lasos Mitzvah, V'loy Asa, V'nenas Loy Asa, Malav Kilas. In other words, says the Chassam Sofer, if Bezdin stops the kid from learning, the kid is considered like he learned. And the world is considered as if it had the kid's learning. It's just the father is going to lose out the benefits of the kid's learning. So that says the Chassam Sofer, yes, we could punish the children. You're taking away learning from the kid and the world, you're not taking it away. It's interesting, the Ksab Sofer and the Tshuva argues on the Chassam Sofer. And he says, I'll just tell you very quickly about in another interesting case. Are you allowed to marry your aunt?
Yes.
Your mother's brother's wife.
Yeah.
Your mother's brother's wife is an Isser D'Rabbanan.
Nephew.
Isser D'Rabbanan. So here, once upon a time, there was a guy who wanted to live with his mother's brother's wife. Obviously, after she was divorced from his uncle. The problem is he was also mezaneh with her when she was married to the uncle. Now, if someone is mezaneh with a woman, there's an issur d'oraisa to live with her. Echad l'baal ve'echad l'boya. So him to her are two isurim. An issur d'rabbanan of living with your mother's brother's wife, and an issur d'oraisa of living with the woman that you're mezaneh with. Yeah? But he said, if you don't let us let us live together, that's it, we're leaving the religion. And we're taking our children with us, and we're converting. And the Ksav Sofer says, don't stop them from living together. Because the Ksav Sofer says, even though we paskin like the Ramah, that if somebody's going to go off the derech, you still got to uphold the halacha. But if the children are at stake, and the children are going to go off the derech, what's the reason you uphold the halacha? So that other people are not niskalkel. But how do you know how to weigh the other people, but you also have the children? So the Ksav Sofer disagrees with the Chassam Sofer. Chassam Sofer says, even if the children go off, you let it happen. Ksav Sofer says no. Okay, let me just tell you one more approach in the Ramah. So far we have two approaches. We have the approach of the Taz, that the reason why you would be able to send the kids home from yeshiva is speaking about younger kids under 13. Kids under 13 are not a separate entity, they're an extension of the father. Then you have the approach of Chassam Sofer, that if you stop the kids from learning, they're going to get schar for learning anyway. And then you have another approach, you have the approach of the Aruch HaShulchan. And it's a very straightforward approach, and it's a nuanced approach as well. The Aruch HaShulchan in Yardei Siman Shin Lamed Daled says as follows. He says, when the Ramah says that if somebody is chayiv cherem, you put him in cherem, even if it means sending the kid home from yeshiva, says Aruch HaShulchan, that's only if it's going to work. If it's not going to work, then of course you can't do it. Meaning like this. Here you have a guy. The guy is siruv ladin. So he's chayiv cherem. So the guy says, cherem, you think I care about cherem? So you tell the guy, if you don't follow the halacha, we're going to send your kids home. And you send the kids home. Fine, so you send the kids home. You're only allowed to send the kids home if you know that the next day the guy's going to say, oy vey, you're going to send my kids home from yeshiva, not going to learn? Okay, I'll follow the halacha. And then once he follows the halacha, you can take the kids right back. That's what the Ramah means. You could send the kids home. You send the kids home if it's going to work to change his behavior, because then you don't have to keep them away from the yeshiva anymore. But if by sending them home, they're going to stay home, and he's going to remain obstinate and stubborn and remain violating the halacha, so the kids are going to be staying home indefinitely, so then there's no tayelas in sending the kids home, then you're talking not allowed to do it. What the Ramah means, you send them home if you feel that's an effective option. And if you look at number 16, he says, Aruch HaShulchan, look carefully at the language of the Ramah. The Ramah said in number 10, Lagarish es banu mibeis hasefer ve'ishta mibeis hakneses ad sheyikabel olav hadin. You send the kid home until the guy follows halacha, meaning there is a reasonable hope the guy will follow halacha. But if you know the guy's not going to follow halacha, you don't need to mess over the kids also. One more factor to throw into the pot is a very interesting tshuva in Rav Menashe Klein Sefer in the Shalshus Mishnah Halachos and Chilek Yud Zayin Siman Tzadi Vav, about a guy who got into a big fight with the yeshiva, and the guy got so angry at the yeshiva, he was a moiser on the yeshiva, and he took them to court. And Rav Menashe Klein just threw in one nekuda in terms of, can the yeshiva send the kid home because of the father's infraction? He said it really depends where you live. If you live in, Borough Park, you live in Brooklyn, you live in Flatbush, where you send the kid out of yeshiva, so the next day he'll go to the yeshiva down the block, you're not really hurting the kid. It's not a big deal to send the kid out of the yeshiva.
What did the guy do again?
There are many. He did bad stuff. Whatever. They got into a fight, and he took it.
They should have Shiur against him.
they issued a siruv against him because he was a meiser on them, so the yeshiva wanted to take retribution by sending the kid away. It depends what the alternative pshatim are. Okay, Rabbi Glatstein, first let me just tell you that I got the marmakomis of this year from a new book that came out, Headlines 2, from David Lichtenstein, who has a radio program on Motzei Shabbos of contemporary issues. So he just published a second volume of very interesting topics. But I think the limud to learn out from here is the strength of halacha and the importance of recognizing the ironclad nature of halacha. That it's something that we can't trifle with. We can't just put it away. We can't brush it aside. And very often people say, "Yeah, but what's going to happen?" Sometimes we don't run the world. God does not place responsibility on us to run the world. We have one responsibility, to follow the Shulchan Aruch. What the repercussions of that are, we'll let the Rebbe Shalom take care of the rest. But really, the limit over here is the overarching authority of the halacha. Shkaychem.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.